Right then folks, Jacob here. Today we're going to be talking about the vagueness of Star Citizen's minimum and recommended specs for its game. And now alongside that we're going to talk about the newest Nvidia GPUs that have been launched and how those are going to affect the game and its performance. So let's of course get right along to it. Now, before I make my recommendations, I generally do prefer higher end systems, so my opinion is going to vary, honestly, in regards to other people's opinions. Like, if you have a look at my PC part link in the description, that is quite an absurd system compared to most people's, and not to mention that doesn't include the water cooling on it, but that's a different topic. If you're interested in that, by all means, let me know in the comments. But anyway. So I'll go through the minimum specs and the recommended specs in what they are, and then we'll discuss the minimum compared to the recommended. So the minimum specs refer to Windows 7, 8.1 and 10, whereas the recommended refers to Windows 10, and of course having the latest Surface packs. That's all well and good. I'm sure some people are obviously going to still use Windows 7. It's not actually Microsoft supported anymore, so you should probably have Windows 10. Like, for real. And then the minimum and recommended for the CPU is both just quad core, doesn't say anything else. And for the GPU, it says DirectX 11 graphics cards, 2 gig of memory for recommended, 4 plus for recommended. 2 gig for minimum, 4 gig plus for recommended, which is fine. And then for memory, it says 16 gig minimum and then 16 gig plus for recommended, that being DDR4 for recommended. Doesn't actually state for minimum. And then storage just says 60 gig mechanical for minimum and then SSD for recommended, which, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll highlight exactly what I've just referred to here so that you actually have a point of reference. Now, quad core CPU for minimum might be okay in some aspects. I mean, there's kind of two variants of a quad core. You've got quad core hyper-threaded and you've got just a standard quad core. A standard quad core, I would consider like a low-end quad core perspective. I would probably take the latest generation of Intel i3 and call that a minimum quad core. You could, if you have like an older system, I would recommend a higher end quad core, something like maybe an i5 6600K, 7600K, something around that kind of ballpark to have decent minimum quad core performance. And then there's quad core hyper-threaded. Now, there's been so many different hyper-threaded quad cores over the years, so I'm just going to bring out a ballpark figure of minimum quad core hyper-threaded would be a 3770K. Now, that is quite an old processor. You're looking at like 8 years old, and that does have DDR3 on it. And you could get 16 gigs on a motherboard with that kind of processor. So that is a decent ballpark minimum spec, in my opinion. I mean, you could go back another couple of years, 3 years before that, where you've got like the first generations of quad cores. And no, don't use one of those. Like, seriously. Yeah, that's where I stand with that. So I see this as minimum spec, high-end old system with a quad core, 16 gigs of DDR3, and then, like, as we were saying, 60 gig minimum storage. And, you know, just get like a 7200 terabyte hard drive from that same kind of area. Something like a Western Digital Blue or something like that. Or like a standard Seagate drive. And sure, you'll be fine. And that'll work as like a minimum spec. Then in regards to graphics cards, now, it's, as we were saying, it refers to DirectX 11 graphics cards. Those are 10 years old in themselves. So, I mean, to get a perspective on this, you're looking at graphic cards like the GTX 580, not to be confused with the RX 580, which is an AMD. GTX 580 is old. That's like at least 9 years old, 10 years old even. And just to put it into more perspective as to how old that is, the series or the generations of graphics cards we've had since then. So that's the 500 series that the 580 belongs in. You've had the 600, the 700, there wasn't an 800, but there was a 900, 1000, the 2000 that we're on now, and now the 3000 that Nvidia has just launched. So that should give you a perspective of how old they are. And they generally launch a new generation of graphic card every year to every 18 months, give or take. So, I mean, as a minimum perspective, there was such a version of a GTX 580 that had 3 gigs of graphical memory. They were generally 1.5 gigs, and so was the what did the 680 have? I think the 680 had 2 gigs, and then the 7970 from AMD had 3 gigs. So it did, typically around those kind of around that kind of era of graphics cards, AMD did well with high resolutions. So 1080 was the standard at that point. You could probably use like a 680, but I mean, absolute minimum. From today's generation perspective, you'd probably want to use a 1660 Ti from Nvidia, and then probably from an AMD perspective, an RX 480. Maybe something like an RX 570 might do a little bit better. And that would be my ballpark minimum. Recommended, I would honestly say, I would literally go along the lines of, I'm just going to shoot out a ballpark area of like Ryzen 5 for AMD, and then like probably the last, an Intel i5 of the last couple of generations would be sufficient. And of course, go online, check benchmarks, and anything better than that would be decent and would be more than suitable. Now, what I will say is that the higher the gigahertz, the less of a bottleneck you will be on your graphic card. So always have, or ideally when you're looking for a quad core or a hyper-threaded quad core, have a look at the turbo and the core clock. Higher, the better. So the last thing I want to go over is the newest GPUs from Nvidia. Now, they announced the 3090, the 3080, and the 3070, and the performance on them is absurd. Like, seriously. The 3070, which is going to cost $500, is going to be outperforming like the 1080 Ti, sorry, not the 1080, the 2080 Ti, and that's like, what, $1,400? I mean, I know how much it is in the UK, but I'm not sure about it in dollars, come to think of it. As far as pounds are concerned, the 3070 is 470, and the 2080 is £1,200. So that is like an absurd difference for the roughly same performance, if not better, from the 3070, which is insane. Like, you're looking at 4K gaming in Star Citizen, or 4K Star Citizen, to actually be playable. That is how much, or how important that is. That is absurd. And I kind of hope that AMD compete with that. Although this is a side topic, it would be cool to have something from AMD. And now the very last thing I want to mention is that I have a new microphone on the way. Now, the microphone I use now is a Rode NT USB, and the problem with that is I cannot preamp it because it's a USB. So effectively, there is now a shotgun mic on the way with all the mounting accessories, the XLR cable, etc, etc. Now, with any luck, I might not need to preamp it because I've got an XLR to 3.5mm jack, but yeah, I might need to preamp it, so we'll see. The mic has certain features that essentially will get rid of the problems I currently have. It's like all this sound processing that needs to be done. I'll put an example of some raw audio towards the end of the video. It's exciting, and it's going to be another step in progress in the channel and its quality, so hopefully that's going to be the way forward. Friday's video should feature that new mic, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you ever so much for watching. Today's video sponsor is the like button for the glorious YouTube algorithm. That will of course allow this channel to grow with your support. Obviously don't forget to comment or subscribe. If you aren't already aware, I generally upload daily, so be sure to check back. My name is Jacob, thank you, and goodbye for now.